band! You hear it?
It is necessary for the recording of sound to convert the sound waves to corresponding changes in light. The sound waves produced by my voice are transmitted through the air to the microphone, where these sound waves are converted to changes in an electric current. These variations in the electric current are then amplified and used to control the light. This varying beam of light falling on the photoelectric cell produces variations in the electric current, which are directly proportional to the variations in the light beam. The sound track. As the varying electrical current in the photoelectric cell is small, a vacuum tube amplifier is required to increase it to the point where it will operate a loudspeaker. Sound track.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. In this episode, we will be basically starting off where we left off from episode 1 with the Tarot series. I cannot be happier enough to have on with me to continue covering that. I got Mario from Symbolic Studies. He's been on in the past, and in the last episode, if you did not catch part 1, he is in that as well. Mario, for people who may not know who you are yet, would you like to give a little introduction and let them know where they can find your amazing work?
Yeah, absolutely. So my project is called Symbolic Studies, and you can find everything at symbolicstudies.com. I would say one of my hubs is right here on YouTube, so at Symbolic Studies. And I have a lot of work related to astrology and the tarot and symbolism. So I've been doing it for a few years. And if you like, my line of thinking or whatever, there's plenty more to check out, and I'm available for readings and things like that. But you can find everything on my website, symbolicstudies.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I highly suggest to go check out his stuff. I mean, he looks at tarot in a different way than I think most people do. And that is another reason why I have Megan on as well. So Megan, from 7 Degrees of Wisdom, would you like to let everybody know what's up with you?
Yeah, hi guys. So I am a practicing occultist and a professional tarot reader, paranormal investigator, kind of got a lot of irons in the fire. But you can find me on Instagram. It's 7 Degrees of Wisdom altogether, no dashes, numbers on the end, anything like that. I've got several accounts impersonating me right now. So if you guys want to follow me there, that's my main page. I have a plethora of information, books, tarot meanings, all kinds of stuff there. I do tarot readings, so if you guys are interested in booking a reading with me online, I do that. And I also read at 2 shops in Fort Smith, Arkansas. And then you can find me on Facebook at Megan Allen, and then parentheses spelled out 7 Degrees of Wisdom if you guys are interested in any of my services or want to ask me any questions or anything like that. So my main shtick is magic and tarot. Those are the things that I'm super into. So thanks for having me on, Nick.
Yeah, of course. And you do also kind of add a Kabbalistic aspect, I feel, to your
stuff. So. You have to.
Yeah. So I think that's huge. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, what's funny that I forgot, I think since the last time we recorded, you had a fake account made for you, right? Because I think I even posted about it.
See, I had more followers than I did, which pissed me off.
See, this shows you right here, these two guests must be doing something right because they both have fake accounts out there trying to scam people. So
yep.
They must be trying to go off a good reputation to try to scam people. That's what I'm getting at.
Yep. I left out one thing. So I also teach classes too on a range of different things, and I can do those online as well. Like, for instance, I did an astrology class yesterday. I'm doing a psychic phenomena class, paranormal class, just things like that. That's probably what I love to do the most besides tarot, is kind of teach these magical subjects because they're all connected.
Yes. And I even have that paranormal episode still waiting to drop with you. which we did cover. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Megan, for coming on. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I can't be happier to have both of you on here. I look up to both of you when it comes to tarot. Some very impressive work. Go check out both their things, for real. If you're interested in tarot, check out their stuff, and you will probably learn a shit ton. So with enough said, I guess we will continue off. I know in the first episode we kind of like jumped around, and I think we skipped a few of them here and there, but I'm going to try to basically go in order this time. So I think from there we will be starting with the priestess, which is technically the second card, but we'll be doing it in this episode. So let me pull that up, and we'll get going.
So shall I start? Or?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Right on. The priestess or the high priestess, yes, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of other decks.
Yeah, the high priestess in my
really
deck.
Interesting. Right. Yeah, exactly. Usually she is in between two pillars. You can see those two pillars on the sides there. It's really obvious in the Rider-Waite version that she is right in the middle. And so when you're talking about this Kabbalistically, via the tree of life, there's the three pillars, the two side pillars, and the middle pillar. But that middle pillar, you'll notice it extends above and below the other two. And when you're dealing with the middle pillar, you're dealing with the third pillar, or what I kind of call the first pillar too, a lot of times. And this central pillar represents, a gateway. And so it's a gateway, it's a doorway, and woman symbolically is a gateway or doorway. That's how we all come into this reality, right? And so even the Roman numeral 2 that you see above her, right, it's the same thing. It's these two pillars. And so when you see two pillars, two trees, there is an implied third pillar, or there's an implied doorway or gateway. And so she represents this in so many different ways. So I would say that there is a transcendental quality to this card, and she's kind of like the transcendental mother in a lot of ways. Whereas I would say the Empress is more of like the next card, the third card, is more so like the terrestrial mother, more so maybe the physical mother, right? And so there's so many things going on here with this card, but one of the main things is that she's usually throned. And I've come across information, this was my hunch actually, but I've come across concrete information that when a person is throned, they are emulating a feminine energy, a sacred feminine sort of idea.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, so the idea of a bride's chair or the queen's throne, when you see a figure like the emperor, as an example, when they're throned, they are actually mirroring the queen. And so the classic example I always say is the fact that the queen bee stays within the hive. It's all the other bees that leave and, do lots of work, come back with pollen, etc. And so she is throned, and this kind of speaks to a lot of things related to traditional, gender symbolism, the domestic nature of woman, taking care of the house and home, which is really the most important work out there, sincerely, truly. And so I would say traditionally, a lot of symbolism related to masculine archetypal energies they're more so travelers, so like in the Thoth deck, as an example, the court card system, the knight or the king, he's on horseback, and the queen, she's actually throned. So in the court card system, the queen is the only one that's actually sitting down, which I think is really appropriate and interesting. You'll notice too that she has a bow and some arrows on her lap. And this is actually alluding to her thighs, believe it or not. It's on her lap, but it's alluding to her thighs. And this gets into a lot of esoteric information related to Ursa Major existing in the northern sky, this being related to a great goddess, a primordial goddess, an ancient goddess. And we refer to Ursa Major as the Big Dipper, but Ursa Major is the Great Bear. So the Great Bear and the Little Bear, two constellations in the northern sky. They each have 7 stars, but the Great Bear really is a mother bear. And in a lot of other cultures, this constellation was a deeply feminine sign. And sometimes it's referred to as the thigh of a bull. And even you could see on her head, you see the crescent horns, right, kind of emanating from her head. So, or the cow, rather. So the thigh of a cow or the thigh of the bull. And so there's symbolism related to the thighs, which actually there's, sexual connotations associated with that, birthing connotations associated with that. And then there are a number of goddesses that correspond with the bow and arrow as well. Like Artemis, as an example, comes to mind. And then you see down below too that there is a camel. And so that camel corresponds with the Hebrew letter that is associated with this card, which is Gimel, which means camel. And the camel is basically the ship of the desert, so there is this traveling sort of correspondence. When it comes to woman, because we're traveling from another domain via woman and birthed into this reality. And so those crescents too above allude to lunar symbolism, water symbolism. Camels are known for the humps on their back that carry water and everything else. But the travel symbolism, just think of going through a doorway or going through a gateway, right? And so the camel actually has a lot of corresponding themes with boats and chariots and things like that. So it's very much looked at as kind of like a ship or an ark that way. And so, so those are some of the things that kind of just, come to mind right now with the priestess card. And I'm sure we'll probably look at other versions of the card as well, and I can chime in then.
So for me, immediately what I noticed is the jewels there on the bottom. To me, those look like not all 5, but the platonic solids in sacred geometry.
Totally.
Especially for sure that triangle there that represents, fire. And then you have the one that represents air, the one on the far left there. I wonder if he meant to do that, because it would be missing the 5th platonic solid, which is the dodecahedron. So what do you think about that?
I don't know. I was going to ask what you both might have thought about the crystals down there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think that's, to me, automatically, as soon as I seen that, that's what I was thinking of, is the 5 platonic solids from sacred geometry. And this card is very geometric. There's a lot of geometric shapes in it too. So like here lately, I've been really studying sacred geometry a lot and using it in my practice. And it's really caused a lot of downloads and things, stuff like that. So I'm wondering if, and then he's got the grid and then the jewels, which kind of reminds me of Indra's net. So yes. Indra's net is connected by the jewels and they are the shapes of the 5 platonic solids that kind of hold them together. So those are the 2 things that immediately stood out for me. And nice. Then we talked about the camel. So the high priestess, there's lots of water symbolism in the high priestess. So she's also, the water represents in magic, the uninitiated becoming, the uninitiated to the initiated, all the water symbolism. So, camels hold on to water. So to me, I would interpret this a little bit as, trying to hold on to your initiation, kind of not letting yourself stray from the path is what I would interpret the camel as. So the bow and arrow reminds me of Artemis. Okay, so you've got a lot of divine feminine stuff going on here. And then I'm trying to figure out if that's a pineapple and grapes, but I guess that would be a pineapple. So pineapples symbolize hospitality, but that doesn't really seem to fit a whole lot. I know that there's pomegranates in the Rider-Waite, which represents, Persephone in the underworld, as above, so below. You can go a little bit into that too. But that's pretty much right now. And then you've got the spiral symbolism as well. I really like that he incorporated the sacred geometry in a lot of this stuff. A lot of the cards that he has, you've got a lot of circular fruit symbolism, and then you also have a lot of the geometric shapes, which is really fascinating to me. Me and Nick are working on something, the orbital of magic, and so we were kind of diving deep into that a little bit, and it kind of has something to do, I'm theorizing, with sacred geometry. So I'm wondering if when he created these, if he was tapping into that, because I'm seeing these patterns in all these cards. There's a lot of geometric shapes, and so sacred geometry is known to be the building blocks of our reality, space-time. And so that's what makes up everything. our psyche, our physical world, and everything. So I know in in the past when I've been doing meditations and stuff like that, I will actually see sacred geometry shapes in my mind's eye. And so I'm thinking that a lot of this stuff that he did in this deck, I think it has a lot to do with some downloads that he received. That's
almost like the geometric shapes you'd see prior to them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, absolutely. And when we get to the Hierophant card, I'll have a lot to say about the sacred geometric aspects of that card. So regarding the Platonic solids, I think it's interesting. So you said that the dodecahedron would be the one that's missing, which is interesting because the Platonic solids each correspond, right, with an element.
Yes.
And so the dodecahedron would be ether or spirit.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so to me, this would imply that she is ether or spirit.
Wow. Okay.
And then also there's this whole line of thinking that I'm super fascinated with is the idea that water exists in several different ways, right? There's the liquid, the gas, the solid, etc. But I just wonder if the highest vibration of water literally is ether or spirit itself. And or another thread that's kind of worth talking about, which actually there's some stuff to talk about this as it relates to the chariot card, but that light itself is literally a different aspect of water, and that water might be liquid light. And so there's some deep encodes within the Freemasonic tracing board side of things that kind of alludes to this, that light literally gets transmuted and changed and is turned into water. So there might be a more intimate relationship with water and light than what we realize, and then also with spirit or ether and water as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
Really,
I can see
really
the connection. Yeah.
For sure. I like the fact the receptivity of her arms, right? It's definitely this embracing sort of thing. It just reminds me of vessels, right? Bowls and cups and whatnot. And so there's a really holistic sort of unifying thing with that, with these crescent shapes. And as I mentioned too, her headpiece or her, what's it called? Her crown, I guess. It just, it's a reference to the cow, the sacred cow or the bull with its horns. And so there's a relationship between the horns of a bull or cow and then also the crescent moon. And we are in Taurus season right now, so it's appropriate to talk about that. So it almost looks like she has a series of horns as well, which is really, really powerful. But
I mean, we think so, like Hathor in a sense too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Somebody did ask in the chat, this is the Thoth deck, and then we'll be showing the Rider deck, and then we'll be moving on, like doing that each card on going forward. Just for people jumping in and don't know. One thing I did want to add, but like it kind of goes like onto a different card and out there a little bit, but that when I saw the camel, when I was looking at the Hermit card, me and two other people were recently covering stuff inside the eyeballs, and I was using the Hermit card to show a bunch of stuff, but a different deck, the Golden Dawn deck. But I did think of the sand. The sand looks like if you were to get a picture of like a dry desert floor, it looks almost just like the cornea, your cornea in your eye. And in that card, it was showing, in my opinion, it was showing cactus as a way of like showing water that's inside your eyeball past your lens. So I was wondering, like, is the camel doing the same thing here? It's just, instead of a cactus, you have a camel, which would also walk on a desert floor.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
So, that could be like really out there, but I mean, in my opinion, unfortunately, I don't even have the stuff to pull up. But I mean, even the shit at the top of her head actually looks like the shit around your pupil. So, right. It's like, who knows where they're going with this.
I mean, I think it's totally related too, because when you're dealing with the eye, you're dealing with the yoni, or you're dealing with the Vesca Pisces, right? And so it's the almond shape. And so you're dealing with a vagina, you're dealing with a gateway, right? And so this card representing a gateway symbolically, I would say it's a gateway to the other side. You know, the material I'm reading right now likes to refer to this domain as Universe A, and then the great beyond as Universe B. You know, so in a way, this is kind of symbolically, you know, a gateway to another universe, to a different plane of existence, you know, to the spirit realm, I guess you can say, or the underworld, actually, I would say, as well. And so she's kind of acting as a guardian in a way, but our eyes, one of the things, maybe I mentioned this last time, but, you know, one of the things about our eyes and about, you know, the shape of the yoni and the Vesca Pisces is that our eyes, most people tend to think of our eyes as just receiving, but it projects as well. So it is a gateway. It's a two-way street. It's not just a one-way street. We don't just receive light. We are actually projecting information as well.
That's really weird to think about.
Yeah, windows to the soul,
Yeah.
back and forth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, I was even wondering, and then we'll move on to the next card. I just want, like, maybe your opinions as well. When I was trying to look at, like, these cards as, like, somehow, like, representing parts of the brain or the eyes, I started to, like, I think, this is my opinion, sometimes I think the male cards are kind of showing, like, energy or light, and I feel like the female cards might be more of really expressing the form or whatever you're actually part of your brain or eyes that you're using, in a sense. Like, the male would be the light or the energy, and the female is more on the system that you're actually changing or going between, in a sense.
Yeah, no, there's something to be said about that. There's a lot of symbolism that suggests that masculine energy is moving energy. And so I think one of the first things that the Demiurge did, and it's like emphasized when you read those texts, was to move. You know, that once he was created, he was moving.
See, when he sits, then there's female energy involved because he's not moving anymore.
Even just look at the bow and arrow. So you look at the bow and arrow, what moves? What actually takes off? It's the phallic arrow that takes off. But what stays? The feminine bow. You know, and so it's speaking to what I was saying earlier. So yeah, masculine energy, to me, I think there's so many things that are mercurial in nature. Masculine energy is very mercurial as well. Mercury relates to the phallus. Mercury also has those horns as well. And I'm sure we'll probably talk about Mercury here in some other cards just because it comes up so much. But Mercury is the messenger of the gods, you know, so he's always moving, always traveling sort of thing. So a lot of times the traveler is looked at as being more of a masculine sort of energy, you know, that it's actually propelling forward. You know, you look at the glyph for Mars, there's the arrow. So there's an implied movement sort of thing. But the last thing I'll say about this card is that I find it really helpful to look at the alternative hermetic titles of the cards. And so the alternative hermetic title for this card is the Priestess of the Silver Star. And so the Silver Star is really interesting. I'm actually learning quite a bit about it right now. I've read in some places that the Silver Star is actually a reference to the moon, which is interesting because we see these lunar crescents, right? But also there's the Silver Star, and some people say that it's actually a reference to Sirius. And so one of the ideas is that there's this deep encode with Sirius that it's actually a child of the North, and that Sirius is a child of Ursa Major, or the great goddess that exists in the North. And so the Silver Star also, in Latin, it's Argentum Astrum, or Astrum Argentum, I can't remember. I always get them flipped. But, you know, this is one of Crowley's groups that he was affiliated with, which, you know, they use the 7-pointed star, the Babylon star. So the Babylon star is the Silver Star, the 7-pointed star. And so there's this idea that the great original primordial goddess was always associated with 7 stars. And so I would say that that's appropriate for this card as well. So just thought I would bring that up. The Priestess of the Silver Star is her other name.
Thank you. All right, and then now we'll go on to, here we go. This is the High Priestess in the Rider deck. Megan, you're more familiar with this, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, the Rider-Waite is like the one I teach all my classes with and everything. So you've got, you know, her dress on the ground. There's a lot of water symbolism.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on there with the water symbolism. We could do a whole show on just water symbolism by itself. But so So the way I was taught with this is that she is like almost like the gatekeeper into the unknown. She is the one that is the veil. She has the pomegranates behind her, and they're actually in the shape of the Kabbalistic tree of life. She's got in her hand, rolled up, is the Torah. Okay, so we've got a lot of occult symbolism in this card. This is probably one of the most rich, heavily occulted cards, probably in the majors, I believe. You got your pillars there, Joachim and Boaz. They're black and white. It represents polarity. So she is the middle way. She is herself the middle pillar. Okay, so she is the keeper of the hidden knowledge. She is the one that takes you from being uninitiated to initiated. Then she's got, the cross symbolism on her chest. You can kind of link that to practicing magic, moving up the tree, the Kabbalistic cross. There's a lot going on in this one too. So basically she is like...
Oh, if I remember correctly, she also goes, sorry to interrupt you, but doesn't she go full between like sphere 3 and 2 on the tree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see, like even then I would consider like 3 is like where I think the magic starts to happen. So I feel like her path does kind of fit like the gateway or the door,
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to add that.
Oh, you're good. So then, we can talk a little bit about the color symbolism. So we have yellow. Yellow is known for having courage. And then we have the blue, which can be also associated with the throat chakra, which is expression. It is also a color of royalty, blue and purple. And then you've got the red, which is the fire symbolism. And, pomegranates are called the fruits of the gods. So they're very divine. It's a very divine fruit. Symbolism. So when I get this, like when I'm doing readings and I pull this up for someone, so, real quick also, the 2 symbolism, 2 is balance, harmony. So she's kind of keeps everything balanced. I will also see this, like if I'm doing a reading for somebody and we get this, to me, it's more like they're being kind of initiated into this world, the magical world. A lot of my clients are deconstructed Christians. And so they always come to me and they're like, hey, how do I get into this? How do I, start down this path? So this card to me is like, you're getting ready to kind of figure things out. And she also tells, people that, sorry, my mind kind of went blank here for a second.
Sorry.
I was going somewhere with it.
You're on a roll too.
Yeah.
It'll come back.
One thing I did wonder about this one with the black and white, I did wonder if those were like the rods and shit, because we have black and white rods in our eyes.
Right.
And like the king is in like, and I wonder if there's like, because the king would be kind of in blue with chesed, over in that area, in my opinion. So I find it interesting that it's like almost like kind of like that color is now following a feminine thing as well. You know what I'm saying? Higher up on the tree. Mm-hmm. I just find that interesting. Sometimes I wonder, like, what is that about? Like, why is the color switching but going with a different, and it's now went from male to female.
Yeah. So what I remember what I was saying now. Sorry about that. So she's all about discernment, right? So she knows by way of intuition and empathy, compassion, what she needs to cut out of her life to kind of get to where she wants to be and stay initiated. So a lot of times when this pops up, that's the meaning for me, for somebody, when I'm reading their cards, is like, you're starting to go down a different path and figure out what no longer serves you and you're getting rid of it. And so she's just a highly intuitive card. You have the triple moons, you can get into, that as well. So, and then you got, it's kind of like, with the Thoth card, you have that moon symbolism that was like repeating behind her head. Well, you have this really big one at her feet, right? So it's kind of like she has the moon at her feet, which she has risen above it. So that's why she's able to discern and kind of be the gateway into the other realm, into the hidden knowledge. So for me, like keywords for her, hidden knowledge.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I like a lot of what you said there. You'll see the Virgin Mary, right? A lot of times she has that exact same crescent moon at her feet. It's really interesting. And so she does. She looks like the Virgin Mary, in my opinion, who oftentimes too, mother and child will be seated. But instead of a child here, she has the Torah scroll. And so I've picked up this theme over time where a lot of times this idea of the mother or the goddess isn't actually literally holding her child, but she will be holding something that represents her child. And so in a way, I kind of see the Torah scroll as being something along those lines. And you mentioned the word veil earlier too, and that's definitely an important word here. And so the veil is really, really strongly related to Virgo. And so, again, the Virgin, so Virgo, Virgin Mary, right? And so the veil, you know, there's so many different veils in this reality. And so the link between this domain and the great beyond or spirit realm, there's a veil between it, you know? And so veil symbolism is actually related to gateway symbolism in so many different ways, right? It's like a doorway. And even a deep sort of esoteric thing is that the hymen of a woman is actually a symbolic veil as well, you know? And so there's this whole tradition, right, of women being veiled before they get married. And then it's a patriarchal figure that lifts the veil, right? And so veil symbolism is super deep. It reminds me of the hijab as well, right, or the burqa. And so, which actually relates to, I think, a lot of Venusian symbolism personally, you know? And so you even see right there on her chest that cross, but then on her head you see that perfect circle, and it's like this kind of reminds me of the symbol of Venus, actually. You know, the circle with the cross right down below, where the feminine is up top in a more you know, in a higher position, I guess, than the cross, which I think is more masculine generally. And then also, too, the one thing I'll say is that the pomegranate, some people think that the original forbidden fruit of the Garden of Eden was the pomegranate and not necessarily the apple, which I think is kind of interesting as well. But lots of interesting things with the pomegranate in general, from the amount of seeds. They generally have the fact that you can hold them in your palm, pomegranate. Sometimes Virgo, you know, in sky maps, you're looking at the Virgo constellation. She's not holding a child, but she's holding a palm branch, right? And this gets into the palm tree and Palm Sunday and all sorts of other things. But the pomegranate, I think that there is something very interesting with the fact that palm is right there, you know, in the beginning of the word. But yeah, beautiful card. So thank you for your insights.
I'll just add real quick some of my weird shit to it that just from like the way that I covered some of the cards previously, how I can see maybe the same thing in this one. When we were covering the eyeball, I had no idea that when your pupil dilates, it spreads out like a cross, actually. It pulls up. But then when it gets closed, it actually screws. So like it literally, like it's almost like a Phillips head screwdriver you'd be like closing it with. So that determines, you know, how much white or how much black your eye is going to fill up with. And there was a time, I think in the beginning of the episode, we show the cornea underneath like some electromagnetic whatever. We explained it in the show. The person who knows the terminology explained it in the show. And when you look at it, it actually literally looks like the 2001 Space Odyssey eclipse thing. Or it even looks like a metal Sith almost underneath whatever way they're using to look at it. So, like, I'm even wondering, like, is that what that moon is for? Is that actually just the cornea? And you're seeing the black and the white, the pupil and the sclera, and, you know, that's either going to open or close how much is there. You know, which then gets into the way the light reflects into your head, and then that's where I think, like, the magic starts. So, I'm just looking at it in that weird sense. That's what I see with this one.
Dude, you should keep on following that weave. And
thank you, sir. No, I plan on it.
Eye symbolism is absolutely crucial and huge. So you're going to see it all over the place for sure.
We're like talking about the eye symbolism. There's this movie from like maybe 10 years ago. I can't think of the name of it right now. But the whole thing was around the eyes, and it was this guy that fell in love with this girl, and she died. And then it had a lot to do with reincarnation as well. And then I started doing research about it a long time ago. I'm kind of a little bit removed from it right now, but the big takeaways I took from it was that every time that you reincarnate, your eyes are pretty much the same. Everything just looks differently. You know, your body's going to be different. But, you know, you guys have seen those like slides and stuff on YouTube and TikTok where you've got people like celebrities and they look just like somebody from like 100 years ago. So there is some validity to that. And they say that your eyes, the shape and the color and everything like pretty much stay the same through several lifetimes as you reincarnate. So that has some significant meaning as well. That if your eyes are still the same, you're just looking through the same eyes the whole time, just a different point of view.
Interesting. we can talk about eye symbolism. I think it's relevant to bring it up during the hierophant discussion because it relates to the bull's eye, the eye of the bull. And so there's a lot to be said about that and the symbolism behind the bullseye and why do we call it the bullseye? You know, there's a lot of good reasons behind that. But yeah, so moving on, go ahead.
If we didn't have our eyes, then we couldn't perceive anything. All is mental. So if that's a way for us to perceive the world individually instead of as a whole, but at the same time, it is the whole. But it's like you have to have your eyes to have all the different experiences that you have. On an individual level, it's like the macrocosm and the microcosm.
I think sight makes everything just, you know, more real, regardless how fake it is.
Yeah. I mean, if you were born blind, you would have no, you know, vision. You wouldn't have anything to reference. Like when you're thinking of things in your mind, that would be also very interesting to kind of research that to see if people still have like some kind of memory or an idea of what things look like if they were born blind. It kind of also, just really quick, sorry. So when I was in high school, there was this girl that was in my ceramics class, and she was blind, and she had never seen colors before. So I tried to describe to her what colors felt like so she could relate them. So like, just for instance, I said, well, okay, well, when you go outside and you feel the warmth on your face, that would be like yellow. And so like, I kind of took her under my wing in the class. So every time she wanted, like, she would ask me, well, what color are you working with? And I'd have to describe it in that way. So that's pretty interesting how, you know, your vision really kind of sets the stage for your experience in this world and the memories that you have, you know, going through lifetime after lifetime after lifetime that maybe you can't directly pull up as a memory, but something that you have deep within you in your DNA. You know, they say that 14 generations of your DNA is stored, your memory is stored 14 generations back in your body.
Interesting.
Yeah.
14.
Also, I just have to say regarding eye before I forget it.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that we refer to it as an I, and then we have the letter I, and then we identify with self as I, right?
Yeah.
I am, as an
I
example.
am.
You know, and so also I just have to say, because this is something that I brought forward in a presentation I did on my channel called Illuminati Symbolism. And basically, I relate the eye and eye symbolism. Like when you see the all-seeing eye, the eye of providence, I really do think it's a reference to Polaris, the pole star. And so it's been said that the lowercase I is the world axis from the North Pole to the pole star. There's a symbolic bridge or pole or Jacob's ladder, stairway to heaven, whatever you want to call it. But that the dot on top of the lowercase I literally is the pole star. And some people have also said that Polaris might be related to Polaris, and that it's actually a reference to the eye itself. And so when you look at Freemasonic tracing boards, usually you'll see these three pillars. The one pillar will be lunar, the other pillar will be solar, clearly lunar, clearly solar, and then the other one will have an eye on top of it. That eye on top is a reference to the stairway to heaven at the north, which Kabbalistically you access it. You access this gateway via Doth, the hidden Sephiroth on the middle pillar, which the High Priestess card crosses that path. It crosses that abyss. And so literally the gateway to the other side is via Doth. And the tradition is that Doth is heavily associated with the north as well. So I think that the eye has a lot to do with Polaris, the star in the sky, which the heavens completely revolve around. And it's always stationary. You know, night after night, it's always in the same spot.
You know that, yeah, I mean, thinking about a lot of what you said, just like stuff that I covered about the lens in your eye and just with the hyaloid canal, like really has me wondering about like the moon and polarity. Because, I mean, that would be a pole, you know, in a sense. You know, it was really weird. And this is like really bugged out, and then we'll move on. But something for Twin Peaks fans, I found it interesting, like, the hyaloid canal is surrounded by the vitreous humor liquid in there. And I do think that a lot of stuff with Twin Peaks, they are showing stuff with inside the eye as well. And there's a guy who's in the Red Room at times, or a major character kind of throughout the whole thing, who is missing his humerus bone, one of his arms. And I'm like, yo, what's like that? Is that some weird, wild fucking connection between, like, you know, missing an arm or just one arm, and that's the hyaloid canal inside the vitreous humor, and that guy's missing his other humor bone? Like, it's fucking weird. Yeah.
Eye Origins, that's the name. It just came to me. Eye Origins. The name of that movie I was talking about.
Oh, right on. Nice.
Okay. I'll actually Google that now. All right, so Mario, if you want to, I guess, take this one.
Yeah, sure. So as I was saying earlier, you know, I think that the High Priestess is more of a transcendental mother, right? And the Empress, I think, is more of the terrestrial mother. And so here you can see she's cradling, you know, her womb. And so sometimes in some cards, like in the Rider-Waite version, it looks like actually she's expecting, that she's pregnant. And so the letter that corresponds with this card, I believe, represents door, the word door. And so here we have more doorway, gateway symbolism, the terrestrial mother literally being how we come into this domain, right? And then you see the two crescent moons on the side of her, and the fact that it's number 3. I also think of the triple moon goddess here as well. I think of it with the High Priestess, but I also see it kind of being inferred here. And she's holding this flower. So this is kind of the weave that I want to pull out for a second, but she's holding a flower. And then you'll notice that down below, there are actually 2 fleur-de-lis. So there's one that looks like it's in the middle. It kind of looks like it's within some sort of triangular design. I don't know if that's supposed to be a little, you know, waterway or something. And then you see another fleur-de-lis, which is right below the shield there on the right-hand side. So the fleur-de-lis relates to the lily. It relates to flower symbolism. And there is a long tradition basically suggesting that there have been women throughout history that have had virgin births. It's called parthenogenesis. So there's animals that literally are able to breed, are able to have children without actually physically breeding with a partner. And so this is encoded in the Virgin Mary story. This is encoded in Virgo, the constellation of Virgo. It's not uncommon to see Virgo also holding a flower. A lot of times it's a palm branch, like I mentioned earlier. Sometimes it's an olive branch. There's several variations. Wheat is also a really common thing that she's holding, but she's also associated with the flower, specifically the lily. So this is where we get fleur-de-lis from. It's flower of the lily. And the mythology states, there's multiple stories like this, that as an example with the Virgin Mary, she was given a lily flower, which was the catalyst for her to have a virgin birth. This is what was needed, or at least according to the narrative, that this flower is what gave her the ability to have a virgin birth, or at least was like the impetus for this virgin birth to occur. So the idea that she's holding a flower is actually a virgin birth reference. And when you see the fleur-de-lis, it is also a virgin birth reference. So the fleur-de-lis, it has that phallic upper portion coming out of the feminine. So the two side petals represents the yoni or the sacred feminine, and then you have that phallus coming out of it. Because the mythology also states is that woman, you know, in a lot of ways, and I kind of go back and forth with this all the time personally, but it does make a lot of sense that the original deity was a goddess, the primordial mother, the dark mother, and she gave birth to the first masculine energy. In the mythology that I'm reading right now, you can look at it as Typhon and Set. So Set was the child of Typhon, or the demiurge was the child of Sophia, or Christ is the child of the Virgin Mary. But the idea is that this sacred feminine energy existed prior to any masculine entity around. And she gave birth to that masculine entity. So she is actually godless. And so is her child. Her child is also godless, right? And so unless you count his mother as being that god. But I see virgin birth symbolism here via the flower that she's holding and via the fleur-de-lis. I think really that's what the fleur-de-lis is all about. The fleur-de-lis is really connected to France, right? And so New Orleans, with its French history, that's why the New Orleans Saints have that symbol as their logo. And basically, my understanding is that a lot of the Gothic cathedrals, the Notre Dame cathedrals, that they were situated and designed so that they would mirror the Virgo constellation across France. And so I did a video about this like 1 or 2 years ago. And so it's really intriguing. It looks very, very similar to Virgo. So that there is a deep Virgin Mother, Black Madonna sort of worship going on. So much so that they put the cathedrals around France to literally mirror the Virgin in the heavens.
Wow. There's so the shield that's at her feet is the same shield, just turned the opposite way in the Emperor card. We talked about that one last time.
Yes, that's right.
The lily that she's holding reminds me of Egyptian blue lotus. It was commonly used in sacred rituals, almost like a psychedelic. I personally use it myself, and it kind of amplifies things. It definitely does change your consciousness a little bit. So to me, that's what it reminds me of when I look at it. So I don't know the Thoth deck as well as Mario does. The Rider-Waite is, you know, what I use. So a lot of this, you guys, is like me just seeing it for the first time, really. I do have the deck. I just haven't had time to like sit down and go through it. But yeah, so you got, you know, the triple moon symbolism. I think it's just interesting that there's a white bird and then a red bird. Okay. White flowers symbolize purity. And then she's got the orb on top of her head, which the emperor always, you know, also carries, you know. So there's a lot going on here. And then, you know, so fertility. So you have the mother bird sitting on a nest of baby birds. Is that what I'm looking at there?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Empress card is all about fertility. It's all about growing things. When we get to the Rider-Waite, I just figured something out too that I'm gonna, that's what I was writing down. I'm gonna say that, but I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. I mean, I don't have a whole lot to say about this.
No, it's all right. That's why I have another card for you. So
yeah.
It's okay. Not expecting a whole lot. With this card, I'll go and I'm going to just stick with the eye shit. I might as well just keep it going. With this card, you know, in the show that is coming out, we do show how like the liquid in your eye does actually make kind of the shape of the fleur-de-lis, the way it actually goes like that. It kind of almost like the way like the stuff is kind of coming off of the top of her head. It even gets like kind of like that. The thing that she's holding in her hand, if you were to like kind of picture that, but maybe like a palm tree, instead of like that. That's almost a perfect description of what an upside down sclera, the pupil, and the hyaloid canal would look like. So I'm thinking that may reference that. And then the two moons, or whatever they're supposed to be, I'm wondering if those are actually the two eyes, and that's, again, the pupil or the sclera. And then on the bottom, this could be a grass, but I'm thinking this would have something to do with the growth or the shrinking of your pupil, fight or flight. That's going to change the sizes. You know what I'm saying? Like, one's a shield, so automatically that means you're fighting, and there's birds on there. And then there's another bird just sitting there, and I mean, I guess eventually the babies are going to go fly off by themselves. You know what I'm saying? But it doesn't look like, that could be a grass, but that will change the pupils in your eye. Again, with this one, I think there's a lot of eye symbolism in this one itself. Even the muscle all the way in back of the eye looks like the cross that's on top of her head that controls which way your eye looks and stuff. It literally looks like an eyeball on a flesh cross.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
It almost looks like those things that was in The Matrix. Those things that were flying at the end that they were shooting down coming out of the ceiling. Mm-hmm. They almost kind of look like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Gotcha. Very cool, man. Yeah, I'm into it. I think it's interesting, and like I said, you're going to find connections all over the place with that. That thing on top of her head, by the way, the bulb with the cross, it looks like it's called a globus cruciger. When the emperor is holding it, sometimes it's referred to as the holy hand grenade. And I think it's interesting that it looks like the upside down Venus glyph as well, right? So again, Venus being the circle with the cross down below. And so in some circles, that is actually used, the cross above the circle is used as the symbol for Mars, and there's actually a lot of interesting feminine symbolism related to Mars. And so including the fact that, Mary, right, M-A-R, even Mario comes from Mars, but I'm learning that there is actually a sacred feminine aspect to Mars that was understood a long time ago, but now it's been inverted, and that it's actually looked at as being more of this aggressive, masculine sort of thing. And so I think that this has happened many times over. I think there's a lot of symbolism that basically has gotten flipped or switched or inverted over the years. And so anyways, it makes me wonder if it's perhaps a throwback sort of reference to that. Also, too, I don't think anyone has said it, but doesn't it look like she's underwater? It kind of looks like this is like an underwater sort of scene or whatever. And it almost kind of looks like she has mermaid feet or something like that, a mermaid tail or what have you. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that was even another thing that I had referenced to in the last, again, in that show that I had just previously recorded. I was saying that I had thought that was a reason for a lot of aquatic gods and goddesses, because now you're talking about inside your eye. There's going to be fluid in there. So, I mean, they could technically be drawn with like fins and shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Here we go. This one's for you, Megan.
Okay. So, a lot going on in this one, too. I will note that I just had this dawn on me that the dress that she's wearing is actually the tapestry behind the high priestess. So when you're coming out of the high priestess mode, when you're, cutting out what no longer serves you, she represents a knowing. Well, this card represents that knowing being manifest, things being created. She's got the Venus symbol there, below where she's sitting. Her crown has 12 stars, which represent the 12 signs of the zodiac. She's also holding a scepter or wand, if you will, upwards as above, so below, so that everything that we create, it also gets created on an astral level as well. Then you've got water in the background, the symbolism. So it's like the high priestess card bleeds into this one, and so she's stagnant one way, going within, and the empress is more going outwards, kind of setting things in motion and letting them be created. So this is pure unbridled creativity and creation with the empress. And then, again, on her robe, she has the pomegranates again. So that's something really cool that I just told you guys. I just literally just looked at it and that came to me. I don't know why it hasn't come to me before, but that's why I like doing stuff like this, because then it pulls it up and makes it fresh in your mind. She's got the wheat fields. So she's just pure creation and creativity and fertility. And it's like, this is like the mother nature card for me. Like this is about just creating things from, being in a point where you're turning inward, and this is the point of outward. So you have in and out, micro, macro, as above, below, same thing like that. So this is just like the ultimate fertility card. It's about growth. And a lot of times when I pull this up in a reading, I will interpret it as spiritual growth, because you're coming from one state to another state. And then, color symbolism, yellow is like courage. It represents creation, happiness, things like that. And then red is about, passion, drive. So you have to have a little bit of fire energy to be able to create. So I think that this, you have the water and fire symbolism in this card as well.
Yeah, I think, even my opinion, I think the trees in the background show the male energy that's being used.
Yeah.
To create, that she's creating with.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I see that too. And so you'll see that I think what was attempted here was that there are a few Venus glyphs, kind of encoded in the card. There's the obvious one on that heart right there, right? And then within the circle of the Venus glyph, you can see that there's green. And so green being the heart chakra, right? Heart also being an anagram for earth, being the middle chakra. And so, but I also think too, on her gown, what you pointed out, the pomegranates, to me, it almost kind of looks like they're trying to make little Venus glyphs with whatever the fruit is. And then down below with the sprouts, it almost just looks like the same sort of design. And then even right behind the main pillow that she's leaning against, it almost looks like that pattern is supposed to be Venus glyphs as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. I noticed that a minute ago.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of interesting. And then, as I mentioned earlier, too, the wheat that corresponds with Virgo. So a lot of times Virgo is either holding wheat, she's associated with wheat, with the wheat harvest and things like that. So Virgo season, my understanding, right, is that traditionally the wheat harvest was around Virgo season. And so because you were going to be harvesting the wheat, you needed to know how much wheat you had around so that you can trade and sell it and everything else. So it's really interesting that right after Virgo, you have Libra, which is the scales. And so scales have to do with commerce and things like that. And so you're literally weighing, the fruits of your labor, if you will, so that you can actually make money and go to market and things like that. And so all of the signs, when you look at when the signs come around, there's this really interesting correspondence with literally, obviously, what's happening seasonally, but what's happening, with people's lifestyles, and when you have to plant, and when things come up, and when things are harvested and whatnot. The interesting thing with wheat, as I mentioned earlier, is that sometimes when Virgo's holding it, it's like a substitute symbol for Christ. It's a substitute symbol for her child. And I didn't know this too long ago, but corn used to be just a default word for all grains. And so when you see like a corn dolly, right, it's made out of wheat. It's not made actually out of corn. And so corn is literally used to be a generic word for all grains. So barley could have been corn, things like that. But corn very much relates to horn as well, right? So even like the cornucopia, right? It's like this horn with things kind of coming out of it. And so horn and corn, very much related to the phallus, very much related to the child, the son, right? And so that's why it's golden in color. And so I kind of see this too. When I see wheat now, I see the product of the feminine. I see kind of like the child, or I kind of see the sun. And there's so much yellow also behind her. So as above, so below. There's like this yellow golden color above her, and then there's this golden yellow color below her. To me, this almost, and even the tree too, in and of itself, the tree kind of being interpretive of a phallic masculine sort of symbol with that trunk, just shooting up to the heavens. I kind of see perhaps there being, they're alluding to this child sort of aspect or concept or whatever. And so also too, Christ, right? He was associated with wheat as well, and with bread, the bread of life, you know? And so you're eating the body of Christ, right? If you're eating the wafer, basically. And so, so there's a lot of stuff kind of going on there, but I think you can make a correspondence with literally wheat and like the sacred masculine as well, being a product of the sacred feminine.
Yeah. When I was learning about this card, the Inanna popped up as well. So she's an ancient Sumerian goddess. So you've got this divine feminine creator, receptacle of creation. This, for me, this is just like the ultimate Gaia card.
Yeah. Mother Earth for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, we'll go on to the next one then. You good? You both good on that?
Yep.
Yeah, sure.
And here we go. Here's the hierophant for you.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah, so this is the card that I'm really, really excited about right now because we're in Taurus season. And so I've been studying it more than usual, and just coincidentally too, the material that I'm reading right now has really, really gotten into it in a big way, mainly through the number 5. So this is the 5th card of the Major Arcana. You see that there's a number of references to the 5 in the card. You can see that there's a bigger star, and then within it there's a smaller star, and then within that there's an even smaller star. And then even behind the hierophant's head, there's that 5-petaled flower there, right? And a lot of roses are 5-petaled in nature. And so it's not uncommon to see a rose when it's illustrated, like the Tudor rose, to be 5-petaled. So this gets into a lot of sacred geometry stuff related to the number 5 and related to the pentacle or pentagram and the things that the pentagram encodes. And so the way I look at it is that the number 5 is also a transcendental number. So it literally is, I feel as though it represents the in-between, between the above and the below, between the terrestrial physical world and the metaphysical spiritual world. The number 5 is encoding so many different things. The mathematics of the number 5 as it relates to the pentagram or the pentacle encode the golden spiral or the golden ratio or the golden mean, which is related to phi, right? The Greek letter phi. And so it's interesting that with phi, you have 5, right? So phi is literally encoded in the word 5 in and of itself. And so if we're using a base 10 system, the 5 is in between the 0 or the 1 and the 10. So it's right in the middle of the whole entire system. And so the 5 basically is this number that is a bridge between the terrestrial and the spiritual, which is exactly what the Hierophant represents. That he is literally the go-between or the in-between between the people and God, pretty much. And so a lot of older Hierophant cards show him as just the deliberate pope. And so he is the high priest, right? We already had the priestess or high priestess. Now we have the high priest. And so the etymology of pope comes from Pontiff Maximus. And this basically means the bridge builder. So he literally is a bridge between, like I said, these different planes, you know? And so he's a bridge because he has esoteric information that other people don't have. Because he has committed his life to this path, you know, he just knows things that other people don't. And in fact, a lot of people have said, Crowley has even said about this card that it looks like they intended to make him look like he's smirking a little bit. That almost like he has a secret that he's not telling everyone else about. And we'll see it in the Rider-Waite version, but it's not uncommon for there to be crossed keys right underneath the Hierophant. And so these keys can be symbolic of many different things. But some people have said it's the gate of heaven and hell. The keys could be the key to communication and language. You know, this is like priestcraft sort of stuff that they understand, you know, some of the nuances or some of the deep encodes with certain words, right? And so you can pull out more information when you really start getting into wordplay and puns and etymology and the roots of certain words and all that kind of stuff. So that that could be one of the keys. And communication in and of itself is also a key. And when you're dealing with Taurus, you're dealing with the neck and the shoulders, but you're dealing with also your throat. And so how important is your throat in communication, right? And if you'll notice too, a lot of hierophant cards, they either emphasize the throat or they hide the throat, right? And so this is interesting. I was talking to a few people the other day, but if you cut an apple in half, you know, horizontally, you're going to see a 5-pointed star, right? That's one of like the secrets of the apple. There's some mystery schools that said, cut an apple in half and study it and tell us what you see. And you can cut it horizontally or you can cut it vertically and you're going to see different things like the torus field, right? And so the torus field of all things, why is it called a torus field, right? And then obviously that relates to Taurus, the bull of heaven, you know, all of these older concepts and stuff.
Well, you know, I like that idea.
Go ahead.
Real quick, I like that idea because there is times where I think, like, you know, let's say, like, you're drawing, like, all right, put the apple, like you were saying, on the card. Let's say you just cut the front of it in half. You would see the front of the apple that makes it look like the taurid. But then if you cut the top of the apple off, you wouldn't see it. You know what I'm saying? It would just look like part of it's missing. Sometimes I do think when you look at symbolism, that they'll show you the top of the apple, but people get confused and think you're looking at something from the front of it. You know what I'm saying? So I even think, like, getting used to looking at things, you know, cutting things from a different way and looking at it, I could see how that would make sense, actually.
Totally.
You know, especially even covering the brain. There's, like, depending on which way you start slicing it, you're going to see different things.
Exactly. The cross-section, depending on where it's at, right, it matters.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's interesting that the apple in and of itself encodes the 5 if you cut it horizontally. And then if you cut it vertically, you're going to see the torus field. Both of these ideas relate to the 5th card of the major arcana, the hierophant here. And then I was saying that this card also relates to communication, right? Communication is a bridge between people. We're able to understand each other via communication through our words, and so it's bridging the gap. So there is a symbolic bridge when you're talking to each other, when you're communicating, or when you're creating our, you know, and any number of things. There's lots of things that are related to bridge symbolism. But I just think it's interesting that we have the Adam's apple right in our throat. And so to me, it's almost like this full circle sort of thing. Apple symbolism, Taurus symbolism, the 5, Adam's apple, right? So the other thing I'll say, there's so many things that I want to get into, but one of the main things that to me I think is really fascinating is that the Hebrew letter that corresponds with this card is Vav, which means nail. And so if you look in the lower right, you can see the glyph or the symbol for Vav. And it even kind of looks like a nail. And so what does a nail do? It binds things together, right? It brings things together. And so this is what the hierophant's role is. It brings the above and below together. This is also the role of the 5th element in many ways, is that it's the ultimate binder of the other elements. It contains all of the other elements, and the other elements come from the 5th element, which is spirit or ether, basically. So the number 5 also relates to Taurus in a really curious way as well, because Taurus in the night sky has a big prominent V in the night sky, and there's 2 stars that represent its eyes. Aldebaran, which is a big royal star, it's huge, and then the other one is Ain or Ain, which literally in Hebrew means eye. So if you look at Taurus in the night sky, you're going to see 2 stars that are its eyes. The bull's eye, the eye of the bull, right? And so so I think that's really fascinating. But I'm like going on so many different tangents, I know. So thank you for bearing with me. But the other thing I want to say regarding the nail is that you're going to see 9 nails above his head, right? The nail is the binder. He is this symbolic bridge or bridge builder. As I've been saying, in the northern sky, there is this symbolic stairway to heaven, or this bridge to heaven. It's fascinating that some cultures refer to Polaris, the pole star, right in the middle of the northern sky as the sky nail or the nail star, right? And so to me, that is really, really intriguing and really fascinating. And it makes a lot of sense because Polaris is fixed, right? So it's almost like it's the hub of the wheel. It's the hub of the cosmic axis.
It was the last nail in the coffin.
Wheel. What was that?
The last nail in the coffin.
Yeah. Totally. So if you have one nail attached to something, you could probably spin it, whatever it is. But it's that second nail that's going to fix, those two things together. So the sky nail, it's a reference to the fixed point in the night sky that the heavens revolve around. And so to me, there's just a lot of interesting correspondences about all of that. And then the last thing I'll say for now, at least, is the fact that the 5-pointed star is coming from the womb of what I presume to be Isis there. And so she's holding the crescent moon and she's holding a sword. There's a lot of divine, sacred, feminine attachments with the sword, I'm finding out, which is really, really interesting. But this is to say that this masculine presence, this hierophant, is of her. It came from her. That the essence of this energy literally came from deep within her. And so that's why it's literally showing you these the man, and that is the hierophant, and then the child as well within the chest of the hierophant. So it's saying that, father and child comes from woman. So all of this energy is coming from woman. The number 5 is deeply related to Venus as well. So Venus makes a 5-petaled flower or 5-pointed star in the night sky over the course of 8 years from the perspective of Earth. So when you see the 5, it is absolutely a Venusian reference, or on a larger scale, it's related to the primordial divine feminine. And even what I'm learning too, which is fascinating, but the duat, the other side in Egyptian mythology, they used a 5-pointed star to represent the other side, the great beyond, the spirit realm, basically. And so I see the 5 and I see the divine feminine, in so many different ways. And it relates to all the sacred geometry stuff that I was talking about. And the 5 really being this kind of intermediary sort of number between realms and domains and stuff like that, which is why so many mystery schools and things like that have really revered the 5, because it's as deep as you might think it is. But so those are a few of my thoughts.
Well,
with this card right
you stole a lot of my thunder, Mario.
I see.
I got one thing to say, and it was from someone commenting. So I ain't got much to say either after that.
This one is, I was looking through all of them real quick. This one's probably my favorite. This is the most occulty card out of the major arcana in this deck. So you have the 4 Lamassu, the man, the eagle, the lion, and the bull. And then he even threw some elephants in there, which I've been trying to figure that out. But I see 3 pentacles here. Do you guys see all 3 of them?
Sure.
How they're kind of nested into each other. So
the light reflect. Yeah, it looks like light reflecting and stuff. Yeah.
Okay. I was talking to Nick about this the other day, where we're talking about fractals of a pentagram. You take a pentagram and then you can draw another one, and you can have a fractal system going on with them, which keeps going on and on forever. Yeah. So yeah, definitely a lot of sacred geometry in this one. And then the keys to heaven and hell, one's gold, is one silver. So that represents certain things in alchemy as well. Combining things to kind of clean the soul to ascend. And then you've got the halo behind his head is, it's very Rosicrucian.
Absolutely. Yeah.
For sure. So that would represent, enlightenment. Jesus is always pictured, especially like in Renaissance pictures. He's got the halo around his head. Well, only kings were allowed to have the halos, around their head, because they were the gatekeepers from God to the people. Okay. So that's why you see, in Renaissance paintings in the Middle Ages and stuff like that, is like, only the kings had halos around their head in those paintings, because they were the go-between. They were the middleman between God and the average people. They were the only ones, fit to rule, because they were, by the grace of God, God allowed them to, be his mouthpiece, if you will.
Right.
So this one, I love this card. This is probably my favorite out of all of them. But there's a lot going on in here. So also, so in sacred geometry, if you do any kind of studying, the esoteric studying with sacred geometry, he is standing inside a Merkaba. I actually use this quite a bit in my energy work. And so I've got one sitting right here next to me. So this is a Merkaba, right? You've got two inverted isosceles triangles. You turn them one way, they turn to a cube, right? And if you turn them this way, then they're pointed outward. So I immediately, my eye was drawn to that he's standing in the Merkaba. So the Merkaba is also known as the chariot of God. It's what ferries our soul from the no thing down to the 3D realm and back and forth. And it's actually what we use to ascend up the tree. So that part stood out to me a lot.
Nice. Yeah, no, Merkaba symbolism relates because of this bridge idea. How are you going to cross the bridge, right? And then it really, really is in full effect with the chariot card, I would say, as well. And then the elephants that you mentioned, I mean, I have two hunches. I don't know if I've actually literally read why they were included, but, you know, the elephants being as big as they are, very, very earthy, you know, Taurus being an earth sign. And even just the color palette of the card, very earthy, right? It even looks like the robe of the hierophant. It almost just like, it kind of blends in with the earth. It's almost kind of like the earth and him are kind of one in a lot of ways, I would say. And he's literally sitting on a bull too, right? So his throne is the bull, this earthy creature. And then the elephant too, they're known for their amazing memory, right? And they actually, it's crazy that they have rituals for their deceased. And so there has been a number of things people have seen over the years and studied over the years where they will perform certain kinds of rites after one of their members have died. And so they actually will treat the bones of their departed, you know, almost like little totems as well. And so it's something that they have a very clear understanding of, this idea of death and what's going on there. And then also too, the hierophant, elephant, you know, I would have to imagine that there's some sort of etymological relationship there, you know.
I get it.
Yeah. So, but yeah, really, really good stuff. I love this card, dude. I mean, you could do a whole show just on this card. I mean, you could do that with all the major arcana, but I do feel a particular sort of resonance with this one.
Yep. Oh, and you got the sacred geometry and the key too.
Yeah. Yeah, those are sometimes referred to as those three circles as the Borromene rings. And so it's like a Trinity sort of symbol. And I have a few sort of interpretations of the Trinity. I don't have to get into all of them, but, you know, you can say mother, father, child. And in a way, mother, father, child, right, can be seen right here, right in the middle. And so we even call a priest, right, a father, the father, right? And so there is that kind of relationship there as well.
So, all right, and then we'll go on to here we go. Rider deck.
Okay. So there's a lot going on here. We have some cross symbolism, obviously. You know, he's also known as the Pope, which we talked about that before. So one thing that I do kind of notice right off the bat is the guys that are at his feet. So they're bald heads, right? So in a lot of religious cultures, they will shave this part of their head so that they can have a direct connection to God. Okay, so that's one thing on there. So the hierophant is kind of known in the occult world or the magical world as someone who takes you through the initiation process. He would like physically take your hand and take you through the initiation process. So he would be like the gatekeeper, the keeper of the keys. He's the one that's going to kind of show you through. He would be the one that's actually doing the initiating physically for you with whatever kind of ritual that would be done. He would be the one that would be walking you through the process step by step. So you pretty much went over everything that I was going to say about this card. I mean, that's pretty much, you know, same thing as well. And you have his 2 feet sticking out below, and you've got, you know, crosses on those too. So he's trying to bring purity down through his feet into this realm. You could think of it like that as well. But that's pretty much all I got. Everything that Mario said was, you know, spot on. exactly same thing.
And
That's pretty cool.
The only thing I'm really going to say that I noticed on here is that like he does have like 3 crosses going down the middle. He's got 3 levels on his hat. He's got 3 levels on here.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the cross that he's holding is called the papal cross. And so only the Pope, my understanding, is supposed to actually be holding it. I don't know if other churches follow that same guideline or whatever, but it's known as the papal cross. And there's a few different ways of looking at it. There's this Trinity sort of thing. And then also one interpretation I really like is that it's actually a reference to a ladder, as in Jacob's ladder, as in this ladder to the heavens, basically. And it does look ladder-like. It looks step-like, right? And so then this Trinity thing, you can see it just like what you mentioned, right? The crown, and then right there on his chest, or that little white strip down his robe. This is another example, by the way, of the throat being covered. So there is something going on there. And then he is in between the 2 pillars once again. So he is also this middle way, which I think is just mirroring the feminine, the sacred feminine aspect that we already saw in one of the earlier cards. And then you could even see, too, on the pillars, some people have pointed out that it's really interesting that it almost looks like fallopian tubes in a womb, on each of those pillars. That's what the little design is, which makes a ton of sense, too, because of all of the symbolism that we're talking about. Taurus, it's ruled by Venus, the V of the 5, V, vagina, Virgo, things like that. And then the other thing I was going to say is that one of the other interpretations that I think is really fascinating with the crossed keys is that one key is golden, the other key is silver. Some people have said and done research, which I think is just intriguing at the very least, that these keys are actually a reference to what's called the gate of heaven and the gate of hell, or the golden gate and the silver gate, which exists in the night sky via Scorpio and Taurus. And so Taurus has this royal star, Aldebaran, some people call it. And Taurus is also a royal star, and it's the heart of Scorpio. So the bull's eye in Taurus is said to be the gate of hell, and the heart of Scorpio, sorry, I don't know if I said in Taurus right now. I think I just did. But the eye of the bull, Aldebaran, is the gate of hell. The heart of Scorpio and Taurus is the gate of heaven, because when you're looking at Aldebaran, you're looking away from the center of the galaxy, and when you're looking towards Antares, you're looking towards the center of the galaxy. So some people have interpreted these 2 stars as being gateways toward the center and away from the center. So the gate of hell and the gate of heaven. And they're right opposite each other. So Taurus and Scorpio are polarity signs. So when Scorpio is rising, Taurus is falling, and vice versa. Which is why, too, in the Mithraic mysteries, Mithras is slaying a bull, and sometimes, if it's a large enough piece, you're going to see a scorpion pinching its testicles. Scorpio relates to sexuality and your genitals. And so, to me, this is very clearly kind of illustrating the relationship between Taurus and Scorpio. So, just throwing that out there. The gate of heaven and hell via Taurus and Scorpio.
There's a couple more things that I noticed, too.
Go for it.
So, like on the ground there, right where his throne is, you have the checkerboard strips going there. So that's very common in Freemasonic symbolism, which represents duality, polarity, union of divine masculine and feminine. And then I keep seeing this red and white symbolism here. So we have on the guy on the right's robe, he has white lilies. The guy on the left has red roses. So there's something with this red and white, and now I'm going to go down a rabbit hole. So I'm going to figure that one out. And he's wearing red and white. Okay, so there's got to be something with this red and white, because I've seen it in the other cards too, with the white bird and the red bird. So I'm gonna look into that.
Nice. Yeah, good call with the flowers.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that, actually. One thing I did want to add that somebody had said a while back, but I guess it still fits here. You know how there's that throat covering? The 5th chakra is also the throat chakra. So, and this is card number 5, so I found that interesting.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah. There you go, yeah.
Do you guys have time to go on to another one, or do you think we should wrap it up here? It's up to you. I know Megan's
I got about 25 minutes or so.
All right. So maybe we'll
Yeah. We could do the other card.
Okay. All right. Here we go. The next one. The chariot. All right.
This is a good one as
Yeah.
well. Being a Cancer, and it relates to Cancer, and you see the crab right there on top of its head. So this one has always resonated with me. But this, the chariot card, it represents, we are all just like what 7 Degrees was saying regarding having a Merkaba, right? And that we all have an etheric body, a light body, an energetic body, you know, and we travel, right? We're travelers. So travel symbolism is so deep. There's so many different ways of getting into it. But in today's world, we use the chariot a lot of times as this symbol of travel. But it's also appropriate to use the horse. It's also appropriate to use the boat or the ark as well. Or, as I said earlier, too, the camel, you know, makes a lot of sense. And so there's terrestrial, mundane travel, but then there's also, you know, a more, just a greater idea of what travel means, as in like the journey to the great beyond, you know, the journey upon death. And so it's been said that the path of the chariot is the path of death. So to me, I'm actually starting to see in a lot of tarot cards, and especially the major arcana as just a system in general, I think there's a lot of death symbolism actually that can be taken away from it. And I think that a lot of mystery schools and lodge systems and things like that, they're actually teaching the ways of death and how to die. And so that's kind of what I'm picking up personally. So the charioteer clearly is a traveler, you know, but the great journey, I think, is being alluded to here. You know, the journey to the other side, to the second universe, if you will. He oftentimes is being pulled by 2 horses. Here, he's not even being pulled, but there's 4 statues in front of him. Each of these statues are actually, it's a hybrid combination between the 4 faces of God, the animals that are called sometimes the cherubims or tetramorphs. So you have the bull, which represents Taurus, and then you've got the eagle, which corresponds with Scorpio, and then you also got the man, which corresponds with Aquarius, and then you've got the lion, which corresponds with Leo. But their head and their bodies and their feet are actually switched. And so you see that there are different combinations of different parts of these animals or creatures. But to me, what I see, one of the encodes is a lot of what's encoded in the Wizard of Oz. So in the Wizard of Oz, you have 4 characters going down the yellow brick road. Doesn't that kind of look like a yellow brick road in a way? The Wizard of Oz is a heavily alchemical film, right? There's so much stuff going on in there. It's crazy. You could do multiple episodes breaking down the Wizard of Oz. But one of the things is that each of the main characters represents one of the elements. And so Dorothy is earth. The Cowardly Lion is Leo for fire. The Scarecrow represents air. He wants a brain, which corresponds with swords and air and all that kind of stuff. And then who am I missing here? Dorothy, Cowardly Lion, Tin Man. This is the Tin Man as well. Tin Man corresponds with water. And so even he has that hard exterior. And then what does he want? He wants a heart, right? He wants his emotions. How did he get seized up actually in the Wizard of Oz? It's through water, through rain, right? So that's how he got rusted up. So everything about the Tin Man, which I actually made a video about this last year, everything about the Tin Man to me implies Cancery symbolism. So when you're dealing with the crab, you're dealing with this hard exterior, right? But they're soft on the inside. And so here, this charioteer, he's wearing armor. You can't even see, you know, any part of his body. But rest assured, there's a soft inside, right? And so there's this protective nature with Cancer. And one of the things that I've picked up is that there's a lot of symbolism that relates to the charioteer with Abraxas. And Abraxas is a serpent-footed, rooster-headed deity that's often pulled by 4 horses. When you see a piece of art, a statue, things like that, and you're dealing with 4 horses and a charioteer, you are dealing with the 4 the four elements, and then you're dealing with the charioteer being the fifth element, right? So the charioteer here, he is representing the fifth element, spirit or ether, right? Being pulled by the four elements. And so there's this old myth in Greek mythology that this one king, his name was Erichthonius. There's a whole long history to him, but long story short, he was born with serpentine legs. And so he actually invented it depends on the mythology, or it depends on who you ask or what materials you're reading or whatever. But the idea is that he invented the first chariot, or the first 4-horse chariot, which is known as a quadriga. And he invented it because he had serpentine legs. And so it's a combination of things. He's embarrassed by his legs, and then it's difficult for him to get around because of his legs. So he invented this chariot system. And so he was known as being a freak, basically. And so he would get around via chariot, right? There's a lot of symbolism that suggests that myth, that line of mythology, actually corresponds with the charioteer here. And so even when you look at his leg right there, I'm like, man, is that showing the end of a tail? When you see his foot, the foot that's in front of the other leg, I don't know if it's supposed to represent a full foot and you're just seeing it in an interesting angle, or if it's actually alluding to the fact that he has serpentine legs. In a lot of other chariot cards, older chariot cards, the charioteer is cut off from the waist down. We're going to see that in the Rider-Waite version. But if you look at the Marseille version, you see him from the waist up, but he is cut off from the waist down. It almost looks like he's in a carnival booth or something like that. So there is this symbolism with the charioteer that alludes to the fact that something is different about his legs. Something is different about him from the waist down. And some people have even speculated over the years that the charioteer is actually a dwarf and that he's actually a short person, or that something has happened to his legs. And so there's this kind of built-in concept that the charioteer is actually a hybrid. And so that's something that perhaps we'll talk about at some point down the road. I don't know, but I made videos about it. So if people are interested in some of this stuff, they can check out my playlist, my cancer playlist, and they'll come across the material about this this charioteer serpentine-legged sort of mythology or whatever. So there's a few things there. But the other thing I'll say about this card specifically, and there's stuff about the Rider-Waite that I would love to get into, but above the charioteer, you see what looks like blue smoke or something, right? Coming from those 4 stacks. These 4 pillars or posts around him, to me, they represent either the 4 fixed signs, some sort of cross in the sky, or they represent the 4 corners of the earth, right? Or the 4 directions, the 4 cardinal directions. And so he is in between these 4 corners, these 4 posts that represent one of the crosses in the heavens. He's right in the middle of it. And here he has a crab above his head, but in the Rider-Waite version, he has a star above his head. This is the North Star. And so as I've been saying, Stairway to Heaven, Jacob's Ladder, it exists at the north. There's this idea that it goes towards the north. That star is the North Star, from what I gather. And the North Star corresponds with Ursa Major and Minor. They each have 7 stars. This is totally a thing. So the fact that it's also number 7 is very interesting. There's a lot of alchemical traditions and whatnot that say that there's 7 steps to get from here to the other side. And so I did a presentation called 7 Gates to the Great Beyond. And so the number 7 is very much related to cycles, transmutation, movement, and things along these lines, which is why it's a perfect correspondence with this card. And as I've been saying, the North Star is in the middle of this hub, in the middle of this wheel that the cosmos revolves around. It's a great wheel. So when you're dealing with wheel symbolism, journey symbolism, you are dealing with the churning of heaven. You are dealing with the revolution of the cosmos as it turns in the night sky, basically. But that blue sort of smoke above his head, it actually encodes abracadabra. And so I don't know if you've ever noticed that before. I don't know if you can zoom in or not, but literally the left stack has an A, and then there's this kind of like loop or hump, and then it says B, and then another hump, R, and then literally it says abracadabra, right? And I believe it's something along the lines of like, I speak things into existence, or I manifest things with my words. sort of thing. So it's obviously a very encoded magical word, and there's all sorts of stuff to say about that too. But those are some of the things off the top of my head about this card.
Awesome. If you want, I'll just like say one thing, and then maybe we'll just move on to your card, just so we can get you done and over with. Only because I know you're like time constrained. Real quick, I don't want to take up too much time. Again, with like the eye stuff, because I did actually purposely use this card when that stuff I just did recently. The crab does look a lot like the lens inside your eyeball. Actually, I think, especially with the things that come out. Like, I hate to say it, but it almost looks like a mask that people are wearing. That's kind of what it almost looks like inside your eyeball. And the muscles around your eye, when your pupil constricts or dilates, when your pupil is smaller, the muscles around your eye will actually look like those white tube rings behind him. The muscles will actually look like that if the pupil was smaller. When it opens up, the muscles end up looking just like those chariot rings. Instead of like this, they almost look like curtains now, like a curtain going around. So I think for me, I think with the chariot in this card at least, you might also be seeing the opening, the screwing that has nothing to do with sex of the pupil. And that's why you're seeing the black and white on the bottom as well. And that's why I think you see the two wheels on the side that could look like a dilated pupil. And then in the back would be the pupil filled with white. So
nice.
That's my quick weird take on that. And then we'll get to the next one. There we go.
Okay,
all right,
so
Megan, go for it.
there's a lot going on in this one. Mario already kind of said a lot. So we have some aquatic symbolism here. He's got fins, his armor. And then he's got, moons on his shoulders. So we have a unification of male and female energy, masculine and feminine energy. He's got alchemical symbols on the bottom of his robe. So then we have, that shape there in the middle beneath the wings. That's the union of the divine masculine and feminine. And then we have some more Freemasonic symbolism as well with the sphinxes. They're the opposite, males on female, females on male. And you have, the checkerboard pattern again, the white and the black. And then he's got, above his chariot, he's got all the stars and then a crown of the star, the one star on his head. So when I do readings and I get this card, I will tell people, okay, well, you have figured out what your will is. So in magic, we call it doing your will or completing the great work. And when you do this, you are doing your will, which means you are doing what you're supposed to be doing, what your divine plan is. And when you are doing this, you embody a unification of mind and soul when you're doing this. So it's basically like, he doesn't have reins on, the sphinxes that are pulling him through. He's doing this completely with just, determination, ambition. Doesn't matter, it sucks when you have to, grind something out and kind of get to the point where you're done. So this card embodies that you're pulling from all your resources to kind of propel yourself forward on the path to enlightenment. So this one's, we're getting towards the middle of the deck here. So we got a progression. So this is the Fool who has progressed and been enlightened and has, lifted the veil. And now he's figured out exactly what he's supposed to be doing to complete the great work. And now he is going forward and doing that. But everything that you said, Mario, was I completely 110% agree. So, but nice. Yeah, that's this card is just doing your will.
Yeah, I love the fact that you brought up the no reins thing. That's really important. And if you notice, there's a tradition with chariot cards where they're not moving. He's not moving. And so it's actually a motionless chariot. And to me, this actually relates to motion as well as motion relates to our emotions. And so it's really fascinating that emotion, you remove the E, you have motion, and then you remove the M and you have ocean. All of these ideas are completely related to each other. So you can be moved and you're moving energy, you're crying or you're feeling something, but you're stationary. You're not actually going anywhere. So in a lot of ways, to me, this speaks to the idea of our emotions moving us, but not physically actually going anywhere. Also notice too that in the Rider-Waite version, he is fused within a cubic stone. So cubic stone symbolism comes into play as well. And sometimes the cubic stone is actually the throne of the emperor. So I have several decks where the emperor is literally just sitting on a cubic stone, which there is Masonic implications, with all of this stuff. I also love the fact that he is on his chariot. He has the belt, right? It looks like, there's potential symbolism relating to the zodiac wheel. I'm not sure, but I think there's implications that's implied that he is a hub of a wheel, that he's in the middle, again, of these 4 posts of this fixed cross. The same way when you spin a top, you have that point on the top, right? That just stays motionless, but everything else is just moving around it, right? And so that spinning top is related to the spinning of the cosmos, of the heavens, which is a gigantic chariot wheel. And when you see that yellow little faint kind of dot with the wings, my personal interpretation of this is that I used to always associate this with solar symbolism, and I'm realizing that it's not always a solar correspondence, that there's actually a polar correspondence with this, as in the pole star, as in Polaris, as in the North Star, which is once again in the center of the heavens that everything revolves around from the perspective of Earth. So there is some sneaky symbolism in this one as well. And I like the fact, too, the oceanic aspect with his armor and stuff like that. That's definitely on point.
You mentioned something before, and I meant to bring it up when we were on the last card, but, only because the last card, it has like the zodiac symbol on the bottom. If you were, and you mentioned like a cog in the wheel, if you were to bring that together, that symbol together, it would be like 2 rollers and like, like a tank, a tank has more than 2 wheels, but how you will have like the thing going around the rollers and it'll be moving perfectly. If you brought that together, I could see how, like, again, you're going about like wheels and it actually going like moving smooth now, being the way it's supposed to be. So something weird like that. And real quick, I just want to add again, with the top on the bottom, the whole spinning thing. And then the white and black, I do question again, is that about pupil dilation? Constriction.
Gotcha. Right. I could see it.
Yes. I guess if you guys have anything else, we can wrap it up there, because I know Megan's got somewhere else to be, and I don't want to hold you up. So, you good, Megan?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Right on. Yeah, I'm solid. I think I got everything out there that I wanted to say. Some very powerful cards, man. We could have talked a lot more, I think, probably.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Thank you both very much. Mario, let everybody know where they can find your stuff one more time.
Yeah, absolutely. Symbolicstudies.com is the main place to find everything, but on YouTube at Symbolic Studies, or Instagram too is kind of one of my main hubs. So symbolic.studies, not to be confused with the other scam accounts as well, right?
Yes.
And they're ruthless, man. It's kind of crazy that Instagram doesn't do more about it, because I know several people who have basically fallen victim to the scam of getting a reading and sending the money and all that kind of stuff. But it is what it is. Yes, but yeah, man, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Of course. Always a good time. And Megan, let everybody know where they can find your work as well.
Yeah. So I don't have any YouTube channels or anything set up. I will eventually get to that point. But my main is my Instagram page, number 7 degrees of wisdom, no dashes, numbers on the end, anything like that on Instagram. And then on Facebook, you can find me at Megan Allen, and then 7 degrees of wisdom. It'll have the picture has my services pinned to it with a picture of myself. So, but I also have some scam accounts out there too. It's got, lines going after each word. So that's not me. That's the one that's usually the scammiest right now. But that's how you guys can find me if you want to book a reading online or take one of my classes online. I do private tarot lessons. I do all that stuff online. I do really comprehensive tarot classes. They're 2 hours, $60. If you guys are interested, you can email me at 7degreesofwisdom@gmail.com or just message me directly on Facebook or Instagram and we can get you set up. If you guys happen to be locals in the Fort Smith area, you can get a hold of me and I could do readings for you in person.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Oh, you also do go live a lot on Instagram. So
you
don't have YouTube, but people can catch you going live on there sometimes if they.
Yeah, that's right. So I do that with friends. We call it spirit talk. It's kind of all of us just kind of getting together and we just talk about random things. It usually ends up being completely different conversation when we start than when we end. But I'm going live on Instagram at 6 p.m. Central next Sunday. With a few friends of mine. So if you guys want to kind of check that out, I host those lives at least once a month. And then me and Nick are talking about doing one too. So we'll definitely be putting that information out if you guys are interested in what we are doing. Because I've been working with him a lot pretty much lately. So we're thinking about, branching off and doing a couple little things ourselves. So looking forward to that as well. Thank you, Mario, for being so awesome. I always enjoy hanging out with you. Like I said before, I'm a big fangirl of yours, so thank you.
That's great, right? Both of us.
No, this is a good time. I really enjoy your perspective and everything else, so this is fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be dropping this in the middle. This will probably work out great. When I start with the eyeball series comes out, the whole stuff with the eyes and the brain. I think I'm going to have like the eyes and then tarot and then the brain and then tarot. So I'm going to drop this all within the middle of that. So maybe when people do catch this after it drops, maybe they'll even see more symbolism within the tarot about the eyes and the brain that we didn't even catch. So hopefully this will work out well the way I'm going to try to drop it also. Thank you both. I really, really appreciate you both taking the time to do this. This was amazing. I always have a great time with the both of you, and I learned a lot myself, and I hope the listeners did as well. Until the next one, that is the end of another Occult Rejects. Everybody, be well. Later.